Dear friends, I have one simple wish. Please help me reach 1,000 subscribers so I can generate a small income to provide more food and clothes for my 2-year-old son. Every bit of support brings me closer to this goal. Your kindness means the world to me. Now, let's enjoy these stories together. It was a quiet, moonless night in a small town in Montana, nestled near the edge of a vast and eerie forest. The kind of night where the silence feels heavy, and every rustle of leaves sends a chill down your spine. Eleanor, a woman in her late 30s, sat alone in her living room, the faint glow of the television casting shadows on the walls. She had always felt safe in her home, but tonight, something was different. Around midnight, the stillness was shattered by a strange noise, a low, guttural growl that seemed to come from outside her window. Eleanor froze, her heart pounding in her chest. She strained to listen, but the sound had stopped. Just as she began to relax, it happened again, louder this time, accompanied by the unmistakable sound of something moving through the bushes. Her hands trembled as she reached for the phone. She dialed 911, her voice barely above a whisper. "There's something outside my house," she stammered. I think it's watching me." The dispatcher tried to calm her, but Eleanor's fear only grew. "I saw eyes," she continued, her voice breaking. "Glowing yellow eyes, right outside my window. And then, I passed out." Within minutes, Officer Daniel and his partner arrived at her doorstep. Eleanor greeted them with a pale face and wide, frightened eyes. Daniel, a seasoned officer with a calm demeanor, reassured her. "We're here now," he said gently. "We'll check the area and make sure everything's safe." They searched the perimeter of the house, their flashlights cutting through the darkness, but found nothing out of the ordinary. "It's probably just an animal," Daniel told her. "We'll come back in the morning to investigate further." As the officers left, Eleanor locked the door behind them, her hands still shaking. She tried to convince herself it was just her imagination, but the fear lingered. She sat on the couch, clutching a blanket, when suddenly, knock, knock, knock. The sound came from the back door, slow and deliberate. Her breath caught in her throat. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice trembling. No answer. The knocking stopped as abruptly as it had started, leaving her in deafening silence. Eleanor's heart raced. She grabbed her phone, ready to call the police again, but then she hesitated. What if it was nothing? What if they thought she was crazy? She sat there, frozen, staring at the back door, waiting for the sound to return. But it never did. The house was quiet again, but the fear remained, gnawing at her like a predator in the shadows. That night, sleep was impossible. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of the wind, felt like a threat. Eleanor couldn't shake the feeling that something was still out there, watching, waiting, and deep down, she knew this was only the beginning. An hour after the first call, the police station's phone rang again. This time it was Eleanor's voice on the line, but it was distorted, frantic, and filled with raw terror. "It's inside the house," she screamed, her voice breaking. "It's..." The line went dead before she could finish. Officer Daniel's blood ran cold. He grabbed his keys and rushed to his car, his mind racing with fear for Eleanor's safety. The drive to her house was a blur. The road was dark, the forest looming on either side like a wall of shadows. As Daniel sped through the night, a deer suddenly darted into the road. He swerved hard, the tires screeching, and the car slammed into a tree. The impact knocked the wind out of him, but he quickly shook it off, his adrenaline surging. He stepped out of the car, his flashlight cutting through the darkness, and that's when he heard it, a rustling in the woods. He turned, and there, just beyond the tree line, he saw them, two glowing yellow eyes, staring straight at him. They were unnaturally large, and they seemed to pierce through him. He froze for a moment, his hand instinctively reaching for his gun, but the eyes vanished as quickly as they had appeared. Shaken but determined, Daniel continued on foot, his flashlight trembling in his hand. When he finally reached Eleanor's house, the scene was chaos. The front door was torn off its hinges, splintered wood scattered across the porch. Inside, the living room was a wreck, furniture overturned, blood smeared across the walls, and the air thick with the metallic scent of fear. Daniel's heart pounded as he called out Eleanor's name, but there was no response. Then, From somewhere deep inside the house, he heard a scream, short, sharp, and filled with agony. He rushed toward the sound, his gun drawn, but when he reached the source, the house was eerily silent. He searched every room, his flashlight cutting through the darkness, but found nothing. Finally, he stepped into the backyard. The sight that greeted him was horrifying. Eleanor's body lay in the grass, mangled beyond recognition. Her clothes were torn, and deep claw marks covered her skin. Blood pooled around her, and the ground was littered with strange footprints, human-like but impossibly large, as if whatever had done this was both man and beast. Daniel's hands shook as he radioed for backup, his voice barely steady. He couldn't shake the image of those glowing eyes, or the feeling that he was being watched. As he stood there, the forest seemed to close in around him, the shadows growing darker, the silence more oppressive. He knew one thing for certain: whatever had done this was still out there, and it wasn't finished. The night was far from over. The next morning, the small town was in chaos. News of Eleanor's brutal death spread like wildfire, and fear gripped the community. Officer Daniel found himself at the center of it all, sitting in a cold, sterile interrogation room at the police station. The air was heavy with tension as his superiors grilled him about the events of the previous night. "What did you see out there, Daniel?" the chief asked, his voice sharp and demanding. Daniel hesitated, his hands clenched tightly on the table. He took a deep breath and began to speak. "I saw something on the road after I crashed my car. It was tall, human-like, but not human. Its eyes, they glowed yellow, like an animal's, and its claws, they were long and sharp, like knives." His voice trembled as he described the creature, the memory still fresh in his mind. The room fell silent. The chief leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "Why didn't you pursue it?" he asked, his tone accusatory. Daniel looked down, shame and fear etched on his face. "I was too scared," he admitted quietly. "I've never seen anything like it. I didn't know what to do." The interrogation dragged on for hours, but Daniel couldn't provide any more answers. He was exhausted, both physically and mentally, and the weight of what he had witnessed was crushing him. Finally, he was released, but the ordeal was far from over. When Daniel returned home that evening, he found an envelope slipped under his door. His heart skipped a beat as he picked it up. It was plain, with no return address, but the words scrawled on the front sent a chill down his spine. "It's watching you." He tore open the envelope, his hands shaking, and pulled out a single sheet of paper. The message was short, written in bold, uneven letters. "You're next." Daniel's breath caught in his throat. He dropped the letter and backed away, his eyes darting around the room. The walls seemed to close in on him, and the silence of the house felt oppressive. He grabbed his gun and checked every corner, every closet, but there was no one there. Yet, he couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't alone. That night, sleep was impossible. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the wind outside, made him jump. He sat in the living room, his gun in his lap, staring at the front door. The letter lay on the table, its ominous message burning into his mind. He knew one thing for certain. Whatever had killed Eleanor was still out there, and now it was coming for him. The investigation had only just begun, but Daniel felt like he was already running out of time. The creature was real, and it was closer than he ever imagined. The question wasn't if it would strike again. It was when. And when it did, Daniel wasn't sure he'd be ready. Daniel couldn't escape the case. It consumed him. Every time he drove past the forest, he felt those glowing yellow eyes watching him from the shadows. The memory of Eleanor's mangled body haunted his dreams, and the anonymous letter, "You're next," played on a loop in his mind. He started carrying his gun everywhere, even to bed. The town was on edge, and so was he. 2 months passed, and just when Daniel thought the nightmare might be over, it happened again. Another murder. This time, it was a family in a house on the edge of the forest. The scene was identical to Eleanor's torn doors, blood-smeared walls, and those same grotesque claw marks. The town was paralyzed with fear, and Daniel felt the weight of responsibility crushing him. Late one night, as Daniel sat in his dimly lit living room, the phone rang. It was the station. Another call had come in. a report of strange noises near the forest. Daniel's heart raced, but he hesitated. He couldn't bring himself to face the forest again, not after what he'd seen. Instead, he assigned the call to Chris, a new officer who had just joined the force. Chris was eager to prove himself, and Daniel, desperate for a break, handed him the case. "Be careful out there," Daniel warned, his voice tight with unease. Chris nodded, confident, and headed out into the night. Daniel watched him go, a knot of guilt tightening in his stomach. Hours passed, and Chris didn't return. Daniel tried to radio him, but there was no response. The station grew tense, and finally, a search party was organized. They found Chris's car abandoned near the forest. The driver's side door ripped clean off its hinges. The interior was a mess, seats torn, glass shattered, and blood smeared across the dashboard. It was clear there had been a struggle. Daniel arrived at the scene, his heart pounding. The forest loomed ahead, dark and silent, but as he stepped closer, he heard it, a low, guttural growl coming from deep within the trees. It was the same sound he'd heard the night Eleanor died. His hand instinctively went to his gun, but he froze, his breath catching in his throat. The growl grew louder, more menacing, and Daniel felt a primal fear take hold. He knew what was out there, and he knew it was watching him. The forest seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy, the shadows shifting and twisting as if alive. Daniel took a step back, his mind racing. He wanted to run, to leave it all behind, but he knew he couldn't. This was his fight now, whether he was ready or not. As he stood there, the growl faded into silence, but the feeling of being watched didn't go away. Daniel knew the creature was still out there, waiting, and he knew it wouldn't stop until it had claimed its next victim. The question was, would it be him? Guilt gnawed at Daniel like a relentless parasite. He couldn't shake the image of Chris's abandoned car, the blood, the claw marks. He had sent Chris out there, and now Chris was gone. Daniel knew he couldn't sit back any longer. If the creature was still out there, he had to be ready. He had to fight. Daniel spent the next few days gathering supplies. He traded his standard-issue pistol for a high-powered rifle, something that could punch through thick hide and bone. He added a night vision scope to his arsenal, determined not to be caught off guard in the dark. He even strapped a hunting knife to his belt, just in case. Every piece of equipment was a reminder of what he was up against, something far beyond human. For a month, Daniel patrolled the edge of the forest every night, his rifle slung over his shoulder and his night vision goggles scanning the trees. The forest was eerily quiet, as if it were holding its breath. Nothing moved, nothing stirred. It was almost too quiet, and that made Daniel even more uneasy. He knew the creature was out there, watching, waiting, but for what? Then one night it happened. Daniel was crouched behind a fallen tree, his goggles scanning the tree line. The forest was pitch black, the only sound the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. Suddenly something moved. A shadow, darker than the night itself, darted between the trees. It was fast, unnaturally fast. Daniel's heart leapt into his throat as he swung his rifle toward the movement, his finger hovering over the trigger. But before he could react, it was gone. The shadow vanished into the darkness, leaving no trace. Daniel's breath came in short, panicked gasps. He scanned the area again, but there was nothing, just the oppressive silence of the forest. For a moment, he wondered if he'd imagined it, but deep down he knew better. The creature was real, and it was toying with him. It was testing him, seeing how far he'd go, how much he could take. Daniel clenched his fists, his resolve hardening. He wouldn't let it win, not this time. He stayed out there for hours, his eyes never leaving the tree line, but the creature didn't show itself again. When the first light of dawn broke through the trees, Daniel finally stood, his body stiff and aching. He knew this was just the beginning. The creature was out there, and it was only a matter of time before it struck again. As he walked back to his car, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. The forest seemed to close in around him, the shadows stretching and twisting like living things. He didn't look back. He couldn't, but he knew one thing for certain. The next time he faced the creature, it wouldn't be on its terms. It would be on his. The night was thick with tension, as Daniel and his partner, Sarah, drove slowly along the edge of the forest. The headlights of their patrol car cut through the darkness, illuminating the twisted trees that loomed like silent sentinels. Daniel's grip tightened on the steering wheel. He had been here before, and he knew the forest was no place to let your guard down. Suddenly, Sarah pointed ahead. "Daniel, look." A massive tree had fallen across the road, its trunk blocking their path. Daniel stopped the car, his heart pounding. This wasn't an accident. Something or someone had done this. "Stay alert," Daniel warned, his voice low and tense. He grabbed his rifle and handed Sarah a flashlight. Together they stepped out of the car, the crunch of gravel under their boots the only sound in the oppressive silence. The forest seemed to hold its breath, waiting. As they approached the fallen tree, Daniel scanned the area with his night vision goggles. The forest was a maze of shadows, but nothing moved. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Sarah stayed close, her flashlight beam darting nervously between the trees. Then, it happened. Deafening crash echoed through the forest as something massive dropped from the trees above. Before Daniel could react, a clawed hand shot out and grabbed Sarah by the throat, yanking her into the darkness. She screamed, but the sound was cut short as she was dragged away. "Sarah!" Daniel shouted, his voice raw with panic. He sprinted after her, his rifle at the ready. The forest was a blur of motion as he chased the creature, his heart pounding in his chest. He could hear Sarah's muffled cries ahead, but the creature was fast, too fast. Finally, he caught up. The creature stood in a small clearing, its massive frame silhouetted against the moonlight. It was humanoid but grotesquely distorted, with glowing yellow eyes, razor-sharp claws, and jagged teeth that glinted in the dark. Sarah lay at its feet, motionless. Daniel didn't hesitate. He raised his rifle and fired. The first shot missed as the creature darted to the side with unnatural speed. The second shot grazed its arm, but the third hit its shoulder, sending it stumbling back with a piercing, inhuman shriek. The sound was deafening, like nails on a chalkboard, and it sent a chill down Daniel's spine. The creature glared at him, its eyes burning with rage, before it leapt into the trees and disappeared into the night. Daniel rushed to Sarah's side, but it was too late. Her neck was torn open, and her eyes stared blankly at the sky. She was gone. Daniel's hands shook as he radioed for backup, his voice barely steady. He stayed by Sarah's body, his rifle trained on the trees, waiting for the creature to return, but it didn't. The forest was silent once more, as if it had swallowed the horror whole. When the backup arrived, Daniel was still there, his face pale and his eyes hollow. But as the paramedics approached, they froze. Sarah's body was gone. The ground where she had lain was empty, save for a pool of blood and deep claw marks in the dirt. Daniel stared in disbelief. The creature had taken her, again. As the team searched the area, Daniel stood alone, his mind racing. The creature wasn't just a predator, it was a hunter, and it wasn't finished. Daniel knew he had to end this, no matter the cost, but as he looked into the dark forest, he couldn't shake the feeling that the creature was still out there, watching, waiting. And it was coming for him next. Daniel stood in the police station, his hands clenched into fists as he recounted the events of that night. The room was cold, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, but he barely noticed. His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed the turmoil inside. He told them about the creature, the attack, and Sarah's disappearance. He showed them the claw marks on his car, the blood stains on his uniform, but as he spoke, he could see the doubt in their eyes. The police chief leaned back in his chair, his face a mask of skepticism. "Daniel," he said slowly, "you're telling me a monster killed Sarah and then vanished into thin air. Do you hear how that sounds?" Daniel's jaw tightened. "I know what I saw," he said, his voice low but firm. "It wasn't human. It was fast, strong, and it took her. We need to search the forest. We need to—" "Enough," the chief interrupted, slamming his hand on the desk. "This isn't some horror movie, Daniel. Sarah's gone, and instead of admitting you messed up, you're spinning this wild story to cover your tracks. I don't know what happened out there, but I do know this. You're suspended until further notice." Daniel stared at him, his chest tightening. "You're making a mistake," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. but the chief just shook his head, dismissing him with a wave of his hand. Days turned into weeks, and the case went cold. No more murders were reported, and the town seemed to move on. But Daniel couldn't. He spent his nights patrolling the edge of the forest, his rifle slung over his shoulder, his eyes scanning the trees for any sign of the creature. He knew it was still out there. He could feel it. Then, one morning, he noticed something strange. Carved into the bark of a tree near the forest's edge was a series of symbols, crude, jagged lines that formed no recognizable pattern. Daniel ran his fingers over the marks, his stomach churning. They were fresh, and they were a message. He didn't know what it meant, but he knew it was a warning. The creature was taunting him, reminding him that it was still out there, watching, waiting. Days later, the first package arrived. Daniel found it on his doorstep, a small, unmarked box wrapped in brown paper. His heart raced as he opened it, and his blood turned to ice when he saw what was inside. A fragment of bone, jagged and yellowed, wrapped in a piece of cloth. There was no note, no explanation, but he didn't need one. He knew who or what had sent it. The packages kept coming. Every few days, another box would appear, each one containing a piece of bone or a shard of something unidentifiable. Daniel tried to ignore them, but they were impossible to forget. They were a constant reminder of the creature's presence, a silent threat that hung over him like a storm cloud. One night, as he sat in his living room, the latest package in his hands, Daniel made a decision. He couldn't wait for the creature to strike again. He couldn't let it take anyone else. He would go back into the forest and he would finish this once and for all. But as he stared out the window at the dark trees swaying in the wind, he couldn't shake the feeling that the creature was already one step ahead. It wasn't just hunting him. It was playing with him, and the game was far from over. Daniel stood at the edge of the forest, his heart pounding in his chest. The weight of his gear, his bulletproof vest, gas mask, and rifle felt heavy on his body, but it was nothing compared to the weight of his resolve. He had come too far to turn back now. Today, he would face the creature. Today, he would end this. The forest was eerily silent as he ventured deeper. The only sound, the crunch of leaves under his boots. The moonlight filtered through the trees, casting long, twisted shadows that seemed to reach for him. Daniel's grip tightened on his rifle as he moved cautiously, his eyes scanning every inch of the darkness. Then, he saw it, a narrow cliffside path, littered with fragments of bone. Daniel's stomach churned as he approached, his flashlight illuminating the gruesome scene. The bones were scattered everywhere, some old and weathered, others fresh and jagged. He knelt down, his hands trembling as he picked up a piece. It was human. His heart sank as he realized what this meant. This was the creature's hunting ground, and somewhere nearby, its lair. Daniel pressed on, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The path led him to a hidden cave, its entrance partially obscured by vines and rocks. He hesitated for a moment, his breath visible in the cold night air, before stepping inside. The cave was a nightmare. The walls were lined with bones, skulls, rib cages, and limbs stacked like trophies. In the center of the cave, he saw her, Sarah. Her body was broken, her lifeless eyes staring into the void. Daniel's chest tightened, and he fought back the wave of grief and rage that threatened to overwhelm him. But he didn't have time to mourn. A low growl echoed through the cave, and Daniel spun around, his rifle raised. The creature was there, its glowing yellow eyes fixed on him, its claws glinting in the dim light. It lunged at him with terrifying speed, but Daniel was ready. He threw a smoke grenade, the canister hissing as it filled the cave with thick, toxic fumes. The creature roared in pain, its movements slowing as the smoke burned its lungs. Daniel didn't wait. He bolted for the exit, his heart racing as he heard the creature's enraged screams behind him. But it wasn't enough. The creature burst out of the cave, its claws slashing through the air. Daniel felt a searing pain in his shoulder as the creature's claws tore through his vest, drawing blood. He stumbled but didn't fall. Instead, he turned and fired. The rifle roared, the bullets tearing into the creature's body. It staggered, its movement sluggish from the smoke, but it kept coming. Daniel didn't stop. He fired again and again, each shot a desperate attempt to end the nightmare. Finally, the creature collapsed, its body riddled with bullets. It let out a final guttural groan before its form began to change. The monstrous features melted away, revealing the face of a man, pale, gaunt, and filled with pain. "I was cursed," the man gasped, his voice weak and trembling. "An ancient ritual in this forest. It turned me knit. This. I didn't want this. I didn't want to kill." Daniel stared in shock, his rifle still trained on the man, but before he could say anything, the man's body began to dissolve, fading into nothingness until there was no trace of him left. Daniel stood there, his chest heaving, his mind racing. It was over. The creature was gone, but as he turned to leave the cave, he heard it, a whisper, soft and menacing, carried on the wind. "You will never escape me." Daniel froze, his blood running cold. He looked around, but there was no one there. The forest was silent once more, but the words lingered, echoing in his mind. He didn't know what it meant, but he knew one thing: this wasn't over. Not yet. As he walked away from the cave, the weight of the forest seemed to press down on him, the shadows closing in. The creature was gone, but its curse, its presence, still lingered, and Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that it was still out there, waiting, and it would never let him go. Daniel's story shows us that ignoring problems doesn't make them go away. At first, he tried to avoid the truth about the creature, but it only made things worse. The lesson here is simple. Don't run from the truth. Whether it's a personal issue or a difficult decision, facing it head-on is always the best choice. The creature grew stronger with every victim it claimed. Similarly, the problems we ignore don't disappear. They get bigger and harder to solve. Daniel waited too long to act, and it cost him dearly. The message is clear: don't procrastinate. Deal with problems as soon as they appear, even if it's uncomfortable. When Daniel finally decided to fight the creature, he didn't go in unprepared. He brought the right tools and had a plan. This teaches us the importance of being ready for challenges. Whether it's gathering resources, learning new skills, or seeking support, preparation can make a big difference. Life is full of challenges, some big and some small. The scariest thing isn't the problem itself, it's the fear that stops us from acting. Be brave, face your problems, and don't wait until it's too late. Like Daniel, you'll find that the truth, though painful, is the only path to freedom. The whispers may linger, but they don't have to control your life. Take charge of your story and move forward. Dear friends, I have one simple wish. Please help me reach 1,000 subscribers so I can generate a small income to provide more food and clothes for my 2-year-old son. Every bit of support brings me closer to this goal. Your kindness means the world to me.